Ready to participate. I got everything set up.
Yes, yes. All right. We are about halfway through, ladies. This is great. If you are just joining on, no worries. Please don't stress. Just to the best of your ability, um, listen or watch the YouTube recordings. You have the first session that we did. All the recordings are there through Unit 14. And then you have the recordings, which I titled 2.0. You'll know what we're doing with this group, but it doesn't matter because we're going over the same information and we go over the quizzes together. My apologies for Monday's class. That one does not have the end of unit 5 and 6, which is the quiz. If somebody reminds me, I will work on posting those answers if you want. But the other 30 minutes of the recording did not take because I had to switch from the laptop to my phone after the internet went out. So we are making great progress. I want you all to feel encouraged instead of intimidated. So know that every bit that you work towards is great, not only for your personal development, but it's going to be for your business and it's going to be for the loved ones around you, because you'll find yourself just rolling this information off your tongue or knowing where to find the resources. And that's what it's all about. So welcome to the Promoting Sexual Health, the Basics and Beyond. We will begin Unit 7, Diversity and Sexual Expression. So sexuality is expressed during our whole life, including how we perform or experience our gender and how we navigate our intimate relationships. At all stages of development, human beings have the capacity and perhaps the inclination to explore bodily pleasure. In ways well beyond overt sexual interactions, sexuality is expressed alone as well as with and for others in both complex and simple ways. So sexual expression. Sexuality may be expressed throughout one's life in many different ways when we use holistic framework for thinking about sexuality. It serves to define sexuality and sexual expression in the broadest forms. This then allows for many experiences and behaviors to be a part of our sexual expression throughout our lifetime. So one common approach to sexual expression concerns the question, am I normal? So it is critical to examine the concept of normal and discuss how criteria are formed based on different cultural contexts. Our relationships from the earliest age may influence our experience of sexuality and how we express it. Messages from our family influence our attitudes, values, and beliefs, as well as our behaviors as children and adults.
I'm trying to help you get this off my.
So, for example, telling a child that it's dirty to touch down there may contribute to feelings of shame or embarrassment that the child may feel about their genitals. As the child grows into a teenager or adult, that may carry these negative feelings with them in ways that influence their sexual experiences or cause them to feel embarrassed about seeking health care, such as a gynecological exam. All right, so there is a really good book reference for this. I will go over that. When we do the quiz, remind me so I can get you the name and the author. It is a great book about shame. So that you can use that again for your business, for yourself, and it may be great for your family because we all have different things that affect our perceptions, okay? So in addition, sexual expression is not limited to sexual or genital behaviors. Our interactions with those we love within and outside our families makes up a large part of how we express ourselves as sexual beings. In those relationships, Ridley and colleagues found that there is an ebb and flow of the range of intensity of emotions experienced and the way they relate to sexual expression in 2006. So showing feelings of love towards and liking others, experiencing emotional vulnerability, and sharing caring feelings with others are among the ways that we express our sexuality. So in 2008, Ridley and his colleagues examined the emotional context of sexual expression in male-female as well as same-gender couples. They found that in all types of relationships, there is a complex interplay between both positive and negative emotions when it comes to sexual expression. So each of us has a sense of who we are as a sexual person. This is often formed from a combination of factors that might include, it's going to have our gender and biological sex, our age, our sexual orientation, the extent of our sexual experience, our attitudes about sexuality, sexual desires, culture, relationship status, and family roles. This sense of self is fluid over our lifetime, when different self attributes may become more or less important temporarily. Sometimes life events cause permanent shifts in how we think of ourselves. In all cases, it is best for each of us as individuals to determine our own identity, along with any labels we may choose or not choose to describe ourselves with. Of course, sexual expression also includes sexual behaviors. Many people embrace a notion of sexuality that defines sex as being limited to intercourse, which is an unrealistic and sometimes unhelpful. In fact, there are many sexual behaviors that one can enjoy or try alone or with others. There is a vast diversity of how people express themselves using sexual behaviors, and that this has been the case for all of recorded history. Recently, some have come to use the umbrella term outercourse to include all sexual behaviors except intercourse behaviors. Research clearly indicates that people do not share a clear definition of what it means to have sex. Various researchers, including Sanders and Reinisch, and Sanders, Hill, Yarber, Graham, Crosby, and Mulhausen in 2010, have demonstrated that without a diverse definition of having sex, false assumptions or confusion can result, making it vitally important to communicate sex with a partner. People feel uncertain of the definition of sex and are inconsistent with how their definition fits with their behavior. So in these studies, the researchers show that people have different ideas about what is meant by having sex. While more than 90% of people take having sex as means penis and vagina sex, far fewer think having sex refers to having had oral sex, anal sex, using sex toys. This is one reason sexual health educators use specific language rather than talking about having sex. We try to be more specific. For example, saying that lubricant can be used for vaginal sex, anal sex, or sex toy play. This gives people a lot more information and ideas than saying lubricant can be used for sex. So it's also true that the labels people have attached to behaviors, whether or not it constitutes having sex, can affect someone's behavior. An example of this would be avoiding a sexual behavior to avoid the consequences of the label they attach to the behavior. Stopping vaginal penile intercourse before either person has an orgasm if it doesn't count as having sex. This is the case when having sex contradicts their religious views, preferred label for their self or their partner's expectations. I'm gonna give y'all a quick example. It was a guy, and he said that when he went to Catholic school, and it was he would interact with the girls and they would do anal so that they could still say they're virgins, and that, you know, that was just the way to go. So when they would go to the doctors and everything would check out, nobody would be in trouble, no highlight. So that was based on their religious beliefs. So he didn't violate breaking their hymen, but they were having sexual activity, and based on their definition, they met the criteria or the requirements that what they thought their parents wanted. I mean, they knew that they wanted something different. If they found out anything else, then they would have probably been upset. But, you know, they just found a workaround. Okay, so people can do that based on that terminology, making it work for them and say, hey, we ain't did nothing, you know? So many Americans consider vaginal penile intercourse to be the only real sex. So this is a heteronormative idea. So in the last unit, we talked about that heteronormative view, right? They call it the heteronormative view. And it's pretty much, you know, everything male, female, and how you function. And that's what the norm is. And that is a perspective called the heteronormative view, okay? Or heteronormative idea, or one that assumes heterosexuality as the normal state of people. One study by Sanders and Reinisch in '99 indicates that only 40% of Midwest college students consider giving or receiving oral sex as having sex. And 20% of them did not believe that giving or receiving anal intercourse was having sex. So like that example I used, yep, they were like, we didn't have sex. In later study by Sanders in 2010, mentioned above, 20% of the survey takers didn't think anal sex counted as sex, and 30% didn't think oral sex constitute having had sex. But these studies have also surveyed mostly heterosexual identified people. So when researchers have asked the same kind of questions among gay men, that they found that nearly all count as anal sex as having sex, and most also count oral sex as having had sex. Understanding how these terms vary based on our age, our gender, and our sexual identities and life experiences, it can help us understand our own biases. So regardless of whether or not we agree with these behaviors warrant having sex, we conclude that they are sexual behaviors. So as such, they are essential aspects of many people's repertoire of sexual expression. So then you have some cisgender women who may not reach orgasm from sexual intercourse. And that's because there's not sufficient stimulation on their clitoris. Some positions encourage more clitoral contact and can be more pleasurable for her. There are those who don't include penile vaginal intercourse in what they do at all. And they likely do feel they do is having sex. What they do is having sex, even if it doesn't include intercourse. This might include someone whose partner is of the same sex, or in a case with one or both partners having a health condition that limits the ability for vaginal penetration to work for them. So if you have a partner that is that may be what do you call it, whether paraplegic or quadriplegic, but has some handicaps where maybe you don't do the penile penetration, right? Or vaginal penetration, but they're doing other activities together. They consider that they're having a sexual experience. And so, you know, they wouldn't go anywhere and say, well, we don't have sex, you know. So their situation is unique in how they go about it. But again, these terminologies, we have to be very careful when we're helping clients or trying to get an understanding about what their needs are. We have to be really good active listeners so we'll know you know, where the conversation is going, because someone may be giving us a hint or some insight on a particular scenario that might be unique. So when talking with others about sex, it may be helpful, reassuring, even to encourage people to expand their ideas about what it means to have sex. So then you have sexual behavior. There are many different ways that people experience their sexual alone or with a partner. Here are some examples of behaviors that some, but not all people participate in. So you have oral sex, that is mouth stimulation of another person's genitals. That is considered oral sex. People may perform oral sex by using their tongues, their lips, and they lick, they suck, they kiss, or otherwise stimulate their partner's genitals or anal area. Oral sex can include cunnilingus, which is mouth on the vulva, fellatio, which is specifically mouth on a penis, and analingus, which is mouth on an anus. Okay, so those terms are key to know, hint, hint on the quiz. And because the genitals and anal area are rich with nerve endings and therefore sensitive to touch, nerve and oral sex can be the source of extreme sexual pleasure for some. So according to the US nationally representative study, the 2015 Sexual Exploration in America survey, which surveyed about 2,000 people between the ages of 18 and 92, 85% of women and men report after having received oral sex in their lives. Many people enjoy sexual behaviors instead of or in addition to intercourse behaviors. Here are the erogenous zones all over the bodies, which we went over in the previous chapter, y'all, right? The other sexual behaviors might include kissing, hugging, rubbing, caressing, sensual massage, licking, biting, sucking, touching, fondling, and laying nude together. Okay, what was the technical term for the mouth on anus? Analingus.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, and this is unit 7. All right, we are going to go down to masturbation. Masturbation is one of the world's most common sexual behaviors. Masturbation refers to stimulating oneself or someone else manually for pleasure. Women usually masturbate by rubbing the clitoris, stimulating their vagina, or applying pressure to the G-spot. So some women also enjoy breast or anal stimulation as a part of their masturbation. Men usually stroke their penis as a preferred method of masturbation, though many men incorporate stimulation of their scrotum and or anus as part of masturbation. According to 2015 Sexual Exploration in American survey, more than half of the women and men ages 18 to 92 have masturbated with a partner. One can masturbate alone or with others. Masturbation can include stimulating our own or someone else's genitals. Some people were raised with negative views towards masturbation, which can cause them to feel guilty or shameful about masturbating. Though the majority of people do masturbate during their lives, research has consistently shown that masturbation is a healthy and dynamic process during adolescence. So whether one masturbates is less important than how he or she feels about it. Typically, feelings of shame or guilt are the only negative aspects one might experience from masturbation. Research by Hogarth and Ingham in 2009 found that among women, positive early childhood communication and young women's positive views of their sexual self predicts subsequent sexual activity. So remember in our previous units, they told you what age children start to masturbate. If you don't know, go back and look at it. That's really key, connecting these two together. So masturbation is key, and they're telling you really, really early along in childhood, this begins. So if you have children, are you helping them, guiding them through it, helping them to understand what's appropriate? Is there shame involved? You know, all those are good things to think about and put into perspective. So masturbation represents the best way to learn what you prefer and how you'll respond to some sexual types of stimulation. In fact, there's a book by Betty Dodson called Sex for One, The Joy of Self-Loving Self-Exploration. And it is emphasized particularly for women who have difficulty reaching orgasm in partnered sex. So many people enjoy masturbating in front of their partners, and some enjoy pleasuring their partner and or having their partner masturbate them. Now, an act sometimes referred to as a mutual masturbation, people who are in satisfying relationships may also sometimes masturbate, including at times when their partner might be available to them or when they simply feel the desire to pleasure themselves. Masturbating alone or in front of your partner need not be an indication that anything is lacking in your relationship with your partner, and masturbation needn't be considered cheating on your partner, although some people are very private about their solo and sexual experiences. So that is a common thing that takes place, that sometimes without good communication between the two partners, masturbation can be taken as a way of you doing you, because what's happening together is not enough, and that is not always the case. So good communication is really key. If you've been selling any of our products and find that you have, for example, a lady that had the sleeve. She said that she wanted to buy the sleeve for her husband, but between the two of them, he wasn't allowed to use the Get a Grip sleeve by himself. She wasn't okay with that. So that's just something that those two people have to communicate. Another couple may say, hey, the sleeve is his. I don't even want to use it. He could use it by himself, or we could use it together. So good communication is how those things are going to, how masturbation can come off in a pleasant way. Sex toys. Using sex toys is a common behavior for many people. Researchers from the Center of Sexual Health Promotion at Indiana University conducted a nationally representative survey of American men and women between the ages of 18 and 60. They found that more than half of women, 53%, and almost half of the men, 46%, had used a vibrator. Okay. This data demonstrates that it has become increasingly common for women and men to use sex toys such as vibrators alone or with a partner. So sex toys can help individuals and couples to experience sex play in new ways. Some women report more intense and quicker orgasms from vibrator stimulation than other forms of stimulation. So men may also enjoy using vibrators for masturbation and for coupled sex play. A wide variety of vibrators and simulators are available to enhance the sexual experience. It's good risk reduction and precautions, and should be used when sharing toys with another person to prevent transmitting sexually transmittable infections. And these STI risk reduction strategies include properly cleaning the toys before and after use, and or using a condom over a vibrator or other sex toy. Washing those hands and cleaning those toys are very, very key. And it is not really recommended that you just share toys, especially if you're not permanent partners. It's a big difference. Just by risk levels. Sexual fantasy and cybersex. A lot of diversity here, right? People may use sexual fantasies when they are alone or to heighten sexual excitement with a partner. Sexual fantasy is a safe way to practice and explore feelings about various sexual behaviors and situations. Fantasies are common and are not necessarily reflective of behaviors we would actually want to do or would actually do. Typical fantasies involve having sex with a famous person, with someone to whom you're attracted, with multiple partners, with partners of various genders, in a public or forbidden place, in ways that involve be forced or being overtaken, or with those overtaken by your sexual appeal, and so are controlled in their desire for you. Fantasies can be about people you know or who are not even real. Some people keep their fantasies private, and others share some or all with their partner or others. So when fantasies are shared, there's perhaps an opportunity to enact or role play with the fantasy scene or situation, or to learn more about your partner or share more about yourself, thus promoting closeness and intimacy. So sex therapists discuss differences between typical male and female fantasy in their book called Private Thoughts, Exploring the Power of Women's Sexual Fantasy. She states that male fantasy tends to be graphic and visual, Interpersonal relationships with dynamics like multiple interchangeable partners, focus on body parts and explicit sex. Female fantasy tends to be multisensory, romantic situations, emotional involvement. In the abstract, however, it is important to note that not all men fantasize about explicit sex and not all women fantasize about romantic situation. There's just a great deal of variation and personalization when it comes to fantasy. So whether part of a fantasy or role play, fantasy can enliven a dull relationship or keep an exciting one lively. Introducing novelty, fun, and playful spirit can be an effective way to enhance your personal and relationship experience. Many accessories and props are available in adult-oriented venues and online, and you only need to add your imagination. So that's the striptease dance, or, wearing sexy lingerie, having special sexy clothing, props, all those kind of things, okay? Now, the main key about fantasy is you and your partner knowing the difference between a fantasy and what's real. When fantasy that line isn't drawn between what's not real, is not there, then that's when you may need some help from a sex therapist. That would be considered not so healthy. Cyber sex and sexting. Cyber sex and sexting and techno sex are terms that include lots of different ways to engage sexually using some kind of technology. In the broadest sense, vibrators and electronic sex toys are a form of techno sex. Also, at the end of the continuum that includes things that are very common and accessible is phone sex. Phone sex can include anything from erotic phone messages with your partner to romantic calls to pay-per-use or free chat line that allow you to find someone to talk sexy to. Technology is developing rapidly to allow tiny things like condoms and large things like stimulator chairs to vibrate and provide sensation pleasure to a user. Some very sophisticated forms of techno sex might include sensory probes and stimulators manipulated by a partner at another location. Cyber sex can include erotic email, texting, often called sexting, erotic websites, companionship networks, and access to most or any erotic image imaginable. Some people also work as cam girls or cam boys, providing sexual conversation and or views of their partially or fully nude body in exchange for money or goods. There are many different ways that women and men can use computer and phone technology to enhance their sex lives. Some sexual health promotion professionals point out that sexting can be used among couples to enhance foreplay or to communicate about one's desires during the day, so that when a couple sees each other in the evening, they've explored and perhaps felt excited about how they might be intimate or sexual together later on. So those things can be used in a great way. Of course, sexting and sharing images can take a bad turn. However, if used properly, they're very, very helpful and beneficial. And just imagine if we are doing such a great job selling our supplies and our products, using Zoom parties and etc. Imagine all of these phone sex and cyber sex sites and businesses, they're booming. Okay, because some people decide they want to be a little bit safer during COVID, and this business right here really picked up. Variations of sexual expression. So therapists and sexologists generally report that there's almost nothing that someone isn't turned on by, and that people report a broad continuum of sexual desires and experiences over the life course. Sexual expression is at the core of being human. People engage in sexual activities to express pleasure, feelings of attraction, affection, emotional closeness, love, romance, connection, celebration, curiosity, and so much more. Now, many, but not all, of these motivations are found across eras and cultures. Now, it is fascinating to review the evolution of cultural standards for and ideas about what is normal. We keep using that term, what's normal. By paying attention to everyday things embedded in our culture over time, we can gain insight about gender, sexual diversity, cultural values and beauty, and expectations about sexual behaviors. An illustration of this is found in how cultural preferences around body hair and shaving has shifted over time. So comfort with hairy bodies and preference for body hair is higher among Europeans than among Americans. In the United States, images from commercial erotica in more recent years featured bodies that are almost exclusively free of pubic and other body hair. I hadn't even thought about that. You know, all the figures and the paintings and the things, and how most oftentimes it did not show that expression, body hair, pubic hair.
I have thought about the way everything has evolved from when I was younger, and everybody, you know, now, like, it's been my personal preference even before it became a trend to
Okay.
be hairless. But older women, they, you know, are comfortable with it because it was the norm. But
Yep.
even when it was the norm, I mean, you know, I was, like I said, uncomfortable with it because I'm thicker, and I'm just like, oh, it's too hot. So before it became a trend and everybody was getting Brazilians and everything else, I had already went hairless.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Hold on. Let me get somebody to come get them. All right. By the time most Americans graduated from high school, about half have had intercourse, although rates have been declining since slightly as of 2019. The average age of engaging in intercourse for the first time is about 16.5 for men and about 17.1 for women in the US. So approximately 90% of Americans report having had intercourse by the age of 22 to 24. Oral sex is also a very common behavior. With a 2015 study, go ahead, showing that 85% of Americans had received oral sex from a partner. Among teens 14 to 19 years old that have ever had vaginal intercourse. I need somebody to read for me. Who we got? You can even read from my screen if you want.
I'm making a salad. I can't. I'm sorry.
You can't? Okay. Let me see who else I got on here.
I can read.
Who was that?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm still following along, so I'll move the page so that I'll keep up with you.
Okay. I lost my spot though where we were.
Okay. So we are start here where it says anal sex less frequent, because this is going over statistics. And so we'll go right there where I got it at the top of the page. And I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Anal sex is less frequent, though it is not uncommon. According to the U.S. Nationally Representative Survey, the 2015 Sexual Exploration in America survey, about 43% of men report having performed anal sex on a partner, and about 37% of women reported having received anal sex. But that's just the number of people who have tried it. Far fewer people seem to have anal sex very often. Indeed, this same study found that only about 10 to 15% of Americans report having had anal sex at least once in the past year. According to the 2009 National Study of Sexual Health and Behavior among adults aged 18 to 94 in the United States, more than 60% of women and more than 70% of men report having any masturbation within the past year, making masturbation among the most common sexual behaviors. Another variation in what people do sexually is indicated by the number of sexual partners they have during their lifetime. Generally speaking, men tend to have more sexual partners than do women in many cultures, including in the United States. That said, it is not uncommon for both genders to have had several sexual partners over the course of their lifetime. Additionally, it appears as though the gender gap is narrowing, which is likely due to the increased numbers of years women are remaining single to pursue other avenues such as career and education goals. In terms of frequency of sex, couples who show each other love and positive regards report more sexual activity and are more open to sexual experiences. And those who indicate negative feelings towards their partners also report heightened sexual arousals for their partner. People who are married or cohabitating report having the most frequent sex. And the primary reason older Americans report less frequent sex is that they don't have a partner available. A 2017 study published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior showed that Americans seem to be having less sex than in earlier generations, but we need more research to understand what may be changing. For example, it may just be that people are broadening their sexual menus, engaging in more masturbation, sex toy play, oral sex, role playing, and other kinds of sex, making it less about penile vaginal intercourse. We don't know, but researchers continue to do work in the area to understand the potential changes. It is difficult to know with accuracy the full range of behaviors people engage in. What is considered normal has to do with the extent that people do a behavior and not if it is considered morally acceptable or somehow more natural than other behaviors. In looking at sexual behaviors of Americans, we see the variation in what people do is what is normal. People engage in all sorts of sexual behaviors. The 2015 Sexual Exploration in American Study, for example, showed that more than 75% of women have worn sex lingerie for a partner. More than 40% of American women and men have had sex in a public place. About 17% have used anal sex toys. At least 57% of women and men have read erotic stories. 10% of women and 17% of men have had threesomes or group sex. And about one third have spanked or been spanked by a sexual partner. In short, people do all sorts of interesting things with their personal sexual lives. There is no way of having sex or being sexual. Changing sexual behaviors. Recently, scientists have been looking more closely at how sexual behaviors change over time. For example, research in the early 1900s showed that only about 20 to 25% of Americans have ever engaged in anal sex. By 2009, the is that supposed to be proportion? The proportion of Americans who had anal sex had nearly doubled to more than 40%. Sex toys use also increased dramatically from the early 1900s to the 2000s, with toys used being uncommonly in the early 1990s and something that about half of Americans had tried by 2009. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine found that sexual behaviors may continue to shift, possi- possibly influenced by the kinds of sexual behaviors that are common in porn. Specifically, many young people ages 14 to 39 report engaging in choking during sex, which carries risk of harm and even death if not done safely. Name calling, being called names like bitch, slut, or whore during sex, or various kinds of rough sex. While rough sex can be consensual and pleasure, it can also be aggressive and is common to sexual assaults. As sexual behaviors change, we need more information and education about how to safely engage in these involving sexual behaviors safely, how to communicate about them, as well as how to draw clear boundaries with a partner if they are something you're not interested in doing or don't feel good about. Some people use what are called yes, no, maybe sheets.
Yes, no, maybe so, like yes, no, or maybe so sheets, essentially. It's a few little typos. It's not you.
Long list of sexual behaviors to review with a partner to help them share what they would like to do together, what they don't want to do together, and what they would maybe consider. Okay, I get
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah, that's what the yes, no, or maybe. Go down the list and say what it is. Let me see. Forgot this one was a longer one. I am going to get through this portion and highlight. We won't be able to like really dissect all the definitions, but this page here where it talks about the paraphilias, a must review. You might need to write down some notes, but it talks about the fetishism, the partialism, the sadism, masochism, exhibitionism, voyeurism, scatologia. I'm not sure if I'm getting that one right. Frotteurism, zoophilia, and necrophilia. You might not remember them, but there is a term for all these different sexual habits that people partake in. So I'm going to read the definition of what paraphilias are. So paraphilias are sexual behaviors that are considered by many to be outside the norm. So there's a lot of stuff outside the norm, but when you start reading the definitions of these, this is for real outside the norm. not what everybody's doing, okay? Specifically, the American Psychiatric Association has defined paraphilias as sexual behaviors that have occurred for someone for at least 6 months and are causing problems for a person or their relationship. That is a clear definition so that you don't get that mixed up. The unit is 7. Under chapter 5, you will find the definitions for the paraphilias. Okay. All right. And the key difference is we said sexual behaviors that have occurred for someone for at least 6 months and that they're causing problems for a person or their relationships. That's what defines it as a paraphilia. So paraphilias involve intense sexual urges and behaviors that might involve non-humans, animals, or inanimate objects, suffering or self or others, or those who cannot or have not provided consent for sexual involvement. People with paraphilias tend to describe themselves as feeling overcome with the urges in their socially unacceptable ways by feeling that the urges are insistent, demanding, and compulsory. They can't control themselves. That's pretty much it. And that's why it's them having a problem or having a problem with others. When you can't control yourself, then that's going to happen, right? As a grouping, this represents a broad spectrum of behaviors, some of which are very common. And these behaviors range from being fairly typical to like fetishes and non-coercive paraphilias generally, to being highly taboo or even illegal, meaning incest or zoophilia. Some paraphilias are solo acts or involve a consenting partner who agrees to participate in, observe, or tolerate the behavior. Others involve coercion or lack the informed consent of everyone involved. And so it violates basic sexual and human rights, and coercive acts can have harmful impacts on those who are involved. So the one they talked about, zoophilia, that's being aroused by contact with an animal, also known as bestiality. Okay, so go over these definitions. You do need to become familiar with them and the difference between non-coercive and coercive. Okay, hint, hint on the test. Okay, on the exam. Why we do what we do sexually. Various emotions are experienced and expressed through our sexuality and sexual behaviors, and there are many motivations for sexual expression. A key aspect of why we have sex is to express emotions like love, attraction, sexual desire, passion, forgiveness, and joy. So many emotions can motivate us to engage in sex, such as excitement, loneliness, guilt, gratitude, or to release tension. Most commonly, research suggests that people have sex because they feel attraction for someone, because they expect it to be pleasurable, or because they are in love or want to express affection to a partner. In long-term relationships, people may also have sex more often because their partner wants to, or they feel it's their obligation or duty to do so. Not that this is always a negative experience for people, but sometimes people start to have sex out of feelings of obligation and then find that they are enjoying themselves and wonder why they don't have sex more often. Sexual expression is a way we address universal human need to be connected to others, and many are longing for connection to others and find sexual expression to be an essential piece of this interaction. Now, a common concern is whether or not the way one wishes to express their sexuality is perceived as normal. Is it normal? Is it typical? However, providing the expression of sexuality is consensual. It is not harming anyone and is done with sexual health in mind. The continuum of what is typical can be quite wide. So those are the key components right there. You want to know, is it an expression of sexuality? Is it consensual by both, all parties involved? Is it not harming anyone? And what about your sexual health? How is it going to impact? Okay. Whether or not we engage in sexual behaviors can affect the definitions and labels we give those behaviors. For example, we may have an abstract definition of sex that says it includes all vaginal penile penetration. It may also be that our own behavior might include a specific experience of penile vaginal penetration, which might not carry with it the label of having had sex. This is likely true if avoiding the definition and label allows us to avoid a negative self-evaluation or to maintain a positive view of ourselves. This could involve wanting to avoid contradicting important religious views, having sex with someone who is not your partner, or positioning an experience you define as sexual assault as having sex. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Sexual addiction and compulsivity. Over the years, the media has seen an influx of celebrities and influential public figures claiming sexual addiction as a diagnosis and explanation for their acts of infidelity on their partners with whom they are committed. However, so we're talking about Charlie Sheen, Eric Bennett, Tiger Woods. However, there are specific criteria for compulsive sexual behavior that are similar to that of other addictions. So in the 2018 study, they found, researchers found that 7% of women and 10.3% of men experience distress or impairment associated with difficulty controlling their sexual feelings, urges, or behaviors. A person who experiences compulsive sexual behavior, popularly called sex addict, uses sexual behavior as a means of reducing anxiety, lacks control over his or her sexual impulses, typically experiences minimal satisfaction from sexual contacts, feels bad about his or her sexual contact but engages in the behavior repeatedly, engages in illicit sexual behavior that endanger his or her own well-being and well-being of his or her family, cannot resist sexual opportunities, continue sexual contact that are not intimate, dangerous, or undesirable. Tolerance is actually they seek increasingly illicit sexual contacts, and withdrawal, which means anxiety and preoccupation with craved activities, symptoms. Compulsive sexual behavior is very much related to the obsessive compulsive disorder, where one cannot eradicate certain thoughts or ideas and has incredible difficulty controlling behavior. Often, sexual compulsivity involves a sexual paraphilia, has to, right, of some sort, and this becomes the center of the person's life. Therefore, it often interferes with the personal relationships, work, and health of an individual and may result in legal consequences. People who are concerned about their partner's ability to control sexual thoughts, urges, or behaviors may find it helpful to find a sex therapist to speak with. They can search for sex therapists in their area through the AASECT.org or the SSTARnet.org. Go ahead and save those two sites. They're going to be real key for everything, everywhere. When in doubt, when you need to refer somebody over to a therapist, that's the site. You'll be able to put it in by state, zip code, etc., and you can help get people connected with the help that they need. Consent, very, very key section here. Consent, it must be acknowledged that some sexual behavior involves some level of force, manipulation, or coercion that can range from very subtle to explicit and overt. So sometimes sexual behavior is performed to survive, stay safe, or maintain a status quo. Too often, sexual behaviors are forced on others through the use of power differences. Using sex to hurt others can create situations that range from sexual harassment or name calling to violent rape, torture, and even death. In all situations where sexuality is used as a weapon against others, it is important for those in less power to recognize that the situation is not their fault and that this situation is about power, not sexuality. So regardless of our position, everyone has a right to live, work, play, and go to school in environments that are safe, respectful, and demonstrate a belief that everyone has an inherent self-worth. There are many factors that can affect one's sexual decision-making, and as such influence which sexual behaviors happen, if any. They include having accurate information about a sexual behavior and or potential risks involved. This is consent, you guys. Using alcohol and or other drugs. Having the means to reduce real and perceived risk involved with the engaging in the behavior. Skill or ability level and support available to refuse or negotiate alternatives. Availability and desires of a partner, as well as the context of the relationship and situation. And one's self-esteem of embracing a reason to care about the outcome or future. So our level of information and sense of personal power is linked to our ability to consent to or negotiate about sexual behaviors. There are many misconceptions about how people should be in a relationship. Each of us has our own ideas about which sexual behaviors are appropriate and feel right, when and with whom. Ideally, everyone would have the opportunity to have informed consent for every behavior they engage in, every time with a person, and every place that it ever happens. This is true even when you are consenting to the same behaviors you've done with someone, you have done with in a place, or you have done them before. You get to consent or not to everything, every time, with everybody, no exceptions. And if we're in the middle of engaging in sexual behavior and we feel unsure or change our minds, that is okay too. It is our right to not continue anything we have initiated sexually as well. Communication about what you are feeling and clarity about what behaviors you prefer to not engage in can allow the relationships and perhaps the interaction to continue. The extent and frequency that each of us wants quote unquote wants, sex varies individually and at different times during our lives. Many factors, including desire, health, medications, lifestyle, availability of partners, and present circumstances, can determine how much sex you want to engage. All these typos. And at any given time. Differences in levels of sexual desire or interest are among the top reasons people seek sex counseling or therapists. This range can be viewed as a continuum like the one below. So you have asexual, no sexual interest, hyposexual, which is low sexual interest, and then hypersexual, which is a high sexual interest. So all levels of interest are okay. And an aspect of our individual sexuality and sexual expression. How we express sexuality will vary over our lifetime. Most will experience periods or choose a situation of celibacy where no sexual activities with others of any gender will occur. Hold on. You said highlight the typos and we'll send them with an evaluation. I know that's right. There's quite a few. So a small number of people, perhaps 1 to 2%, as indicated by researchers. Okay, we're going to keep moving. All right, we do not have a romantic or erotic attraction to anyone of either gender. This is called asexuality and can include an absence of masturbation, sexual fantasy, sexual activity, and not having involvement in sexual aspects of a relationship. Asexuality can be transitional, temporary, or lifelong sexual identity and or orientation. Just as we do not know how or what causes one to be heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual, we do not know what causes one to be asexual. As with other aspects of sexual development and sexual identity, it is like a combination of genetics and environmental influences. So on the chapter of consent, been very controversial about male versus female, and you know how guys, they're erect, they're in the moment, and you know, women have the choice to be like, no, I don't want to go through with this. Well, you know, you've had both sides of the coin saying, hey, well, you can't do nobody like that. However, you're reading it here. At any time, no means no and stop means stop. So this is also important in setting boundaries for yourself, with your partners. And as we're teaching our children or the youth coming up, that is really, really important. Things are a lot different and can become problematic because, again, consent is really, really, really key, and laws and regulations have changed. So you also have to know what's going on in your state. So I wanted to bring that up. Communicating our wants. Communicating our wants, this is really, really key. Many behaviors can become enjoyable ways to express romantic and erotic feelings. Knowing what our partner wants or prefers is impossible without communicating about it. This conversation needs to be integrated into the sexual experience as an ongoing dialogue. It can't happen once and be done. Just as we like different behaviors at different times, sometimes we like the same behaviors done differently. Consider that many variations to describe a behavior. These variations can exist on several continuums, such as you got dry, wet, rough, gentle, soft, hard, quietly, loudly, fast, slow, deep, shallow, private, public, stiff, relaxed. Consider a number of sexual behaviors from a kiss to intercourse and how the variations on the graph might help you describe to your partner how to match the behavior to your mood. Often we rely on moans, nudges, and oh yes to indicate our feelings, and this can help. Essentially, we should never rely on mind reading to get what we want. The best way to get what you want is to ask for it. So when communicating with a partner about what you want sexually, you may wish to consider raising the topic when you're not in bed. Talk about it over coffee, on a walk, or while relaxing together at a later time. Talk about what you like and what you want more of. Be specific. I love you when. Sandwich things you'd like to change between, using positive comments like, I want us to cuddle more after we have an orgasm. And I really love when we, or how you do. Suggest some things you'd like to try. Say why you think it would be a hot or fun or good idea. Be open for negotiation. Try to suggest an alternative if our partner suggests trying something you are unsure about or are uncomfortable with. Perhaps there is a variation which you would try or a different idea you can suggest. Rather than just saying no, you respond with, I don't know about that, but how about we try this or this other thing? Let me see. Play relationship activities with cards. Yes, that's why we have those cards, right? So this page right here alone, just a hit or note to self. If you have a VIP group, go live in your VIP group. You can take notes from this. You can read some of this, but that's a little discussion in your VIP group. Give these hints to your clients. Hey, if you're in a relationship with a partner, here are some really good communication tips. And these are great talking points. They will they'll love you and thank you for this. Okay. Really good insight. It doesn't matter that you're just learning it or that you might have had some of these components. You don't have to present it like you're just this new student. This is good information. You could have gotten this from an article, but to get comfortable with the information, use this as a great moment to share. Doing the sexual health highlights and key points is a winner always in your VIP group. Always, because they're going to just eat it all up. I got one more message. Let me see. Hold on. Yes, yep, really good talking tips. And guess what? Love Month is here. Go ahead and get everybody working on it. And then offer the cards and the variations of things using the Onyx blindfold. That helps, one of the partners relax enough to be submissive. Give all those kind of wonderful, good ideas, but they got to talk about it. I love that checklist. You might make a checklist or find something and post that and say, hey, that yes, no, or maybe idea. Yes. Cultural impacts on sex. So this is a little bit redundant. We talked about in the previous chapter, the really key effects that religion and culture has on one's sexual beliefs from childhood all the way up to present day, right? Culturally, we have attitudes and beliefs about who should or should not engage in sexual behaviors, with whom, when, the differences in sexual behaviors, and how it can be attributed to many variables. So we got race and ethnicity, we have age, availability of partners and relationship status, sexual orientation and identity, religious and spiritual beliefs, and health. Research suggests that people tend to form romantic relationships with people who are, for the most part, similar to them. For example, it is common for one's partner to be of a similar age, a similar economic background, and similar race or ethnicity. That said, there are often at least some areas in which couples have their differences. So by keeping an open mind and interest in learning about each other's background and perspectives and committing to positive communication, couples can often understand and appreciate each other's differences. So rather than allowing these differences to hinder a relationship, In a study conducted by Gaddis and colleagues, they found that couples with a high marital quality tend to be similar in terms of core personality characteristics. So compatibility with the partner in terms of beliefs or values weren't as important as marital quality. Interestingly, when two people are first getting to know one another, the beliefs and values tend to be disclosed early on, whereas it takes time to get to know the true personality characteristic of a mate, right? Tools of our culture, including music, art, poetry, and other ways that some express their sexuality beyond engaging in sexual behaviors. Some people have unique influences from their culture that are important to how they express love, affection, lust, or attraction to a partner. Creating and enjoying these things and other forms of self-expression, like dancing and poetry, those are rich avenues for sexual expression. We know that a variety enlivens the sexual experience, so try the same things in new ways and places and try to be open to new things as well. So by attending to all 5 senses in our sexual interactions, we can heighten awareness, focus our attention, and enhance the experience for ourselves and our partners. So taking the time for including fragrance, music, lighting, positioning mirrors, using silk sheets or pajamas, along with special oils and lubes, can break a boring routine, increase the feeling of connection with a partner. In your work as a sexual health promotion professional, you might encourage those around you to consider how their own culture has influenced how they express feelings such as love or attraction, as well as how their partner, if they have one, may be influenced by their own background or culture. So that was really, really good. Interactive activity, not difficult at all. So activity 1, enjoy being sexual. Aside from penile vaginal intercourse, list 5 other ways that people can enjoy being sexual with each other. Be creative. So they gave you all kind of lists of outer course, right? It's an open book quiz, and these activities are meant to be difficult, just a reflection. So look how easy it is to come up with some outer course or sexual activities that are not penile or vaginal. So I put example, anal intercourse, kissing, central massage, oral sex, dry humping, which, put down what you'd like, okay? So not very difficult. It's 2 sections. You want to make sure you're hitting save, then go to the next section, right? So also try listing 10 ways that a person can show their romantic partner that they care for them. How can you show affection? Verbal, passionate notes, gifting, holding hands, massaging feet, giving hugs, all those kind of wonderful examples, right? Music, poem, dance, yes. Let me see something. Uh-oh. All right. So make sure that you hit save my answer, and then you're going to have the option to submit after that, okay? So make sure you're getting those activities done. And who's ready for the quiz? Y'all know I need help. I'm going to need help.
Let's get
All right. Only penile vaginal sex constitutes as having had sex. True or false?
false.
Yep. Most Americans have had intercourse by the time they are in their early 20s. True or false?
True.
The gender gap is becoming wider in terms of number of lifetime sexual partners.
You know what?
True.
That's true.
Okay. That was 3, right? Says the gender gap is becoming wider in terms of number of lifetime sexual partners. No, I don't think the gender gap is becoming wider. We're gonna see, okay? I'm gonna put false on that one. 4, single individuals report having more frequent sex compared to their married or cohabitating counterparts. True or false? Are single people having more sex
False.
than married? False. I'd agree. Based on the research, okay? 5, having accurate information about a sexual behavior and the potential risk involved affects an individual's sex decision-making capabilities. True or false?
True.
Okay. Which of the following factors gives or provides individuals with a sense of who they are sexually? Is that gender and biological sex, age, sexual orientation and culture, relationship status, attitudes about sexuality and family roles, or all the above?
All the above.
All the above.
Yes, 6 is all of the above. Who you are sexually is, very, very broad. Cunnilingus and fellatio are examples of sexual positions.
Oral sex.
Email me, yes, oral sex. There we go. 8, which of the following statement is true regarding masturbation? Masturbation is not a very effective way to learn how you may respond to some types of sexual stimulation. People who are satisfying relationships sometimes engage in masturbation. Sex toys are not very common among adults, or all the above statements are not true.
People who are in satisfying relationships.
Yes, sometimes engage in masturbation. Really key. Remember I said that misconception that sometimes people think masturbation is a replacement for like what's not happening in their life, and that's not true. It doesn't mean a partner is lacking. It doesn't mean anything. All right. 9, exhibitionism is an example of what type of paraphilia? Non-coercive or coercive?
Non-coercive.
Okay. So we have to determine the difference between non-coercive and coercive for exhibitionism and fetishism. So exhibitionism, we're saying, is non-coercive. Paraphilias, where fetishism is an example of coercivism. Coercive. I'm gonna take them isms off. That was my fault. I'm thinking that exhibitionism is coercive and the fetishism is non. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. That was Unit 5. Chapter 5. So I'm looking at the paraphilias. Y'all can see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay. So non-coercive is the fetishism and coercive is the exhibitionism. Coercive is being, so the exhibitionism is being aroused by exposing, you see, y'all see the typo? Your genitals to an involuntary observer. So that's considered
Hungry. What am I
coercive.
gonna eat?
Uh-oh, somebody hungry. All right. So we're going to do for 9, that's coercive, exhibitionism, and fetishism, non-coercive. Okay. That's the same way you're going to do if you're
I'm
doing.
sorry, wait, can we go over this one more time? I missed it.
Yes, right here, right here. Look on this screen where it has the paraphilias. So unit 7, chapter 5. So exhibitionism, being aroused by exposing your genitals to an involuntary observer, that is a coercive paraphilia. And then fetishism, being sexually aroused by inanimate object like shoes, lingerie, leather, is a non-coercive paraphilia. So the
Which one
question
was the coercive?
for number 9, so exhibitionism is coercive and fetishism non-coercive. So it's the third option. Yep, so we're picking the third bullet. All right, number 10. Blank involves mutually gratifying sexual interactions between consenting partners. Voyeurism, frotteurism, exhibitionism, sadomasochism. Gratifying sexual interactions between consenting partners.
I don't remember that one.
Voyeur.
Blank involves mutually gratifying sexual interactions between consenting partners.
I know that it's not exhibitionism.
I missed it.
It is. We're gonna know if I'm wrong, but I thought it was sadomasochism, but
I can't see the question.
no. What screen is it on for you all?
No, it's on the quiz. Can you read the question for number 10? Because it's not all on my screen.
Your whole screen right there. We see the end of the question.
What? Okay. Let me see something. Why is it doing that? Let me see. I'm gonna read it, but I don't know why it's not showing y'all everything. Okay. Number 10 has blank, involves mutually gratifying sexual interactions between consenting partners. So we're gonna find out, because when I hit submit, it'll tell us.
What did you select?
I did the sadomasochism because that was some of the definition, but I don't know if that's the only one. Outer course is what? Engaging in sexual activity outside? No. Engaging in sexual activity with someone outside of your current relationship? No. Refers to all sexual behaviors except intercourse behaviors, or refers to sexual experimentation?
The third one.
Yeah, refers to all sexual behaviors except intercourse. All right, we have 12. Which of the following is not included in oral sex? Is it cunnilingus, analingus, coitus, or fellatio?
Coitus.
Coitus.
Coitus. Fellatio is the penile, oral. Yep. So that's oral. 13. Which of the following are not considered non-coercive paraphilias? Is it fetishism, masochism, partialism, exhibitionism? Non-coercive. I'm gonna go back to the chart real quick. Which one is non-coercive? Exhibitionism. I mean, wait, that was it, right? They want to know which ones are not considered non-coercive.
Exhibitionism.
Exhibitionism, based on this right down here. I don't know if y'all can see it or not, but you know. Let me try to go back. Exhibitionism, based on that chart. 14, this term describes an individual who has no interest in sex.
Asexual.
Asexual. Based on, remember that line? with the points, and it has asexual, hyposexual, and then hypersexual. Yep. 15, this describes an individual who has sexual interests and desires in both males and females. Is this hyposexual, hypersexual, asexual, or none of the above?
None of the above.
Yes, they try to trick y'all to see if y'all was caught up. So 1 we got right, which is false. 2 was true. 3 was false. 4 false. 5 true. 6 all the above. 7 examples of oral sex. 8 people who are in satisfying relationships sometimes engage in masturbation. 9 we have coercive, non-coercive. 10 sadomasochism. It is right. 11 outer course refers to all sexual behaviors except intercourse behaviors. 12 coitus. 13 exhibitionism. 14 asexual. 15 none of the above.
I had a question about the when we're talking about the line with the asexual, hypo, and hypersexual. The way that they did the diagram, is that like the standard way of doing it? I was just wondering why like the asexual wasn't in the middle and then the hyper and hypo were on the polar end, weren't on the polar end.
Okay, so because asexual is complete is pretty much complete the opposite of the hypersexual. Asexual is like it's like a 0. So if you had the points and it was a 0 to 10, hypo is a 5 in the middle.
Okay.
You get it? If we did like it was a point and it had 0 where asexual is, and then where the hypo is, it would be 5, and then where it's hyper, it's a 10.
Okay, I follow.
Yeah. So that's why they did it like that. And then you got some people that's leaning. They might not all the way be on that 0, but they're at that 2 or 3.
Gotcha.
Yep. And and through a lot of reading and research, finding that different IUDs and birth control have a heavy effect on people's libido, but medically it's not enough data to say that that's what's affecting someone, but that is making some people either believe or push them towards being more asexual. It's not just minimizing sex drive, it's eliminating in some people.
Hey,
so
what y'all doing? Why y'all sitting up
that's
there?
real stuff. That's why there's a lot more research in the Patty Brisbane Foundation that's being done, because they're finding out that there's not enough research done to say that it's not a factor or something that's involved.
Well, they actually give Depo to sexual assault predators to reduce fear.
See, it's like, depending on what the discussion is, they don't always, you in the doctor's office, they're not always going to say, no, I don't think that has a lot to do with it. You know, it depends. Depends on who you're talking to. But more research definitely needs to be done, because a lot of people are trying to figure it out and imagine if your partner, whether it be he or she, they don't always understand all those different factors. It can be really damaging to a relationship. All right. We are not going to be able to spend as much time, even though this is a shorter chapter. So we're going to breeze through this because we got 30 minutes, but it's only five chapters in this unit. Okay. But gender issues. So feel free to read back over, but I'm not going to leave out the key stuff. Okay. So evolving ideas about what it means to be who we are in terms of our gender are allowing for gender expressions that are more flexible and varied than has been true in the past. What it means to be male, female, transgender, gender non-binary is understood to be more complex than it once was. So as such, gender role expectations based on outdated images carry less power for limiting opportunities for those outside the norm. New opportunities for creating acceptance for individual differences can be realized on both individual and interpersonal levels. At the most basic level, it may appear that the distinguishing factor between a man and a woman are the genitals. However, as you will learn in this unit, that distinguishing factor is not particularly useful after all. Also, y'all see another typo? There are many ways of experiencing gender. So sex and gender, which is what we call birth assigned sex, that is determined by anatomical and biological aspects of being human, whereas gender is considered to be a societal concept related to how birth assigned sex is expressed. Remember, we talked about those norms, and when we use that term gender, it's like how you're supposed to act. You're supposed to act like a boy, you're supposed to act like a girl. Traditionally described as a dichotomy of masculine or feminine. We now describe or experience gender in more blended ways. That is, rather than two choices, we view gender as a range or continuum that might blend masculine characteristics and mannerisms with those that are feminine. People rarely have all masculine traits or all feminine traits. Rather, human beings tend to be interested mixes of both masculine and feminine characteristics. Sometimes the majority of someone's attitude or behavior are not coded as or identified with either masculinity or femininity. This person's gender may then perhaps be perceived as ambiguous. This is called androgyny and falls in the middle of the gender continuum. So between masculine and feminine. Now, this is funny because who was that just asked that question about that line graph? Because they did like the opposite. What's your name? Eurisha. So believe it or not, okay, now look at this line graph. You got masculine over here, right? And you got feminine over here, and then you have this one in the middle. Now, I didn't make up this chart, okay?
Can I see the chart?
Yeah. What's showing on my screen right now?
I see from masculine to androgynous. And I'm guessing feminine's on the other side.
Yeah. So you're on your phone?
I am.
Are you able to rotate it to the side?
Yep, did that.
And it didn't come through.
Mm-mm.
Okay. I don't know how to help you with that part, but when we're offline, go back in. It's on the first page on Unit 8. Okay. And it's just a line with the arrows at the end, like we use for math. Yeah. It's just that it has androgynous, which is the
like the 0 point in terms of masculinity and femininity.
Yeah, and it's in the middle. So it's the total opposite of the chart that we just looked at, but is relating to two different things, and they just did that differently. Because that question was asked, Eurisha, it just made me think about that.
It made me think about that too.
Yes, but they consider it falling in the middle of the continuum. So in this case, again, about perception. So one important aspect of living as a sexual being is acting like your sex, man, boy, woman, girl, is expected to act. And from the first moments of life, every child is getting messages about what sex they are and how they're treated differently based on people's perception of sex. So learning about societal and cultural expectations about how genders perform is among the earliest and most impactful sexual learning. As early as the age of 2, children understand what their birth assigned sex is. Although they do not know that it probably won't change during their lifetime. As such, it's common for young girls to talk about wanting to be boys, or for young boys to talk about wanting to be girls. It does not mean that they actually want to change genders. Such statements may simply reflect them wishing to do something that they see a sibling or schoolmate doing that they want to do. For example, young boys ages 3 to 6 commonly talk about wanting to be like girls when they play dress up. After all, girls tend to have much more interesting dress-up clothes, like dresses, sparkly shirts, rhinestone shoes, colorful hats. Whereas boys dress-up clothes are often quite limited to belts, hats that represent firemen, policemen, and other stereotypical male jobs. That said, some children who talk about wanting to be or actually being another gender are sometimes showing early signs of being transgender. At these early ages, it is impossible to know how a person's gender identity will unfold. However, parents can show their child love and support, affirming their gender as they explore their gender. Okay, Candace. So I want you all to know something, because she had brought up a key point. She says she would use her laptop to follow along, but she still has reading activities and quizzes to do, so she can't open them. Guess what? You can move forward, but you just have to open that unit. And every time you open a unit, whether you took the quiz or not, you go back out, you'll be able to open the next one. You just have to have opened that chapter or that unit. So you know how I have the green go button?
Yeah.
You can access those by just making sure you open up the prior chapter. As soon as you open up the prior,
okay.
They don't want you to go from 2 to 10.
Right.
But you got to go to 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And then once they're all open, then you can flip flop back and forth.
Oh, I'll be caught up next week.
Hey, that's what's up. Yes. So that section is pretty much talking about just teaching about the sex and gender factors, which is also redundant because we keep talking about those gender norms, okay? And its impact on us from the time we come into this world.
Quick question.
Yes.
With the asexuals, that's only in regard to gender? Because I had a friend, I think he identified as gay, but he didn't seem to have interest in having any sex.
Okay, so the asexual is relating to one's sexual activity. So meaning your sex drive, hyper, hypo, or asexual, or anything in between.
I'll have to check the status of that, but okay.
So yeah, so if someone stated that they're asexual, they have no desire, they're not engaging anything that falls under what we just went over in that unit as sexuality, like cuddling, masturbation, that sexual side of them. They're not doing that and not interested in it.
Right.
So yes, that would be a client that, if you're trying to say, hey, get you some of this and spice this stuff up, and they like, well, I'm asexual. Yeah, they know what they're talking about. That means that they're not interested. And that person, if they're asexual, but they're interested, would really need to go to a sex therapist, because it's beyond just using some pheromones and having some new activities introduced in their life.
Right.
Yep. So that has to do with sex drive.
Okay.
And then
I guess it's when you identify and whether or not you have sexual activity. So like I said, but he got so it's so you can be gay or straight or bisexual and have zero sex drive.
Yes, and be asexual.
Okay.
Yep.
I hope I can retain that. Continue.
You know what? You're gonna have to do like me and have that little notebook, that little cheat right there.
That's why I asked.
Yes. So what we went over Monday was really key to one's like gender identity and then their sexual orientation. It's not one and the same. So when you find out that someone's gay or lesbian, this still doesn't tell you about what they interact with and how they interact. You still have no idea. You just might know that they have an attraction for the same or opposite sex or something like that, but you still have no idea what kind of activities they're doing because the activities take on a whole nother role. So just what they're identifying with is totally different. It's just different. Okay. And that's why they had to go over that whole thing about what people say they are, whether they're bisexual or this, that, and the other. You still have no idea what type of activity they do. Just because you're bisexual don't mean you do oral. It doesn't mean that you do penile penetration or intercourse, or you know what I mean. So it's categorizing and breaking down people's preferences, but it's very layered, so to say. Very, very layered. And it takes more than a basic conversation to really find out these things. All right, biological, physiological, and socio-cultural factors. So it can be nearly impossible to base how people are on whether differences are caused by biological or environmental influences. So it's difficult to separate the biological differences between men and women from the environmental ones, because they are male or because they are female or because they're intersex. So both biological and environmental and socio-cultural influences create variations among people from the earliest time of existence, even prior to birth. So to use generalizations that perpetrate stereotypes and create limits on people's opportunities is not helpful. Nonetheless, it can be beneficial to explore what similarities and differences we do believe exist between males and females regarding several aspects of sexuality. So developmental differences, as we will discuss below, the fetal development of a biological sex, differentiation kicks in at about 8 weeks of gestation. So during childhood, girls typically reach puberty about 2 years before boys generally do. This tendency for girls to have a 2-year step ahead of boys extends to other areas of adolescence development. So that's including social maturation. That is, fertility for females tends to start in an earlier age than for males. However, hers will end with menopause, typically occurring in her 40s and 50s, while he can remain fertile well into old age, even though men's sperm quality decreases with age, okay? The average age of marriage in the USA is 26 for females and 28 for males. The average age of first penile vaginal intercourse in females is 17 and then 16 for males. Though, of course, not everyone has penile vaginal intercourse, on average, though people of all sexual identities, gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, tend to begin having oral and vaginal less often, anal in their mid to late teens, and males report having more lifetime sex partners than do women. In the end, females have a slightly longer life expectancy than do males. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, that National Center for Health Statistics, the average life expectancy for women is about 80 years and about 75 to 76 years for men. Aggression. Males demonstrate more aggressive behavior than do females. This includes both physically and verbally aggressive behavior. While androgens, or those male hormones, play a role in this, it is important to underscore the fact that culturally, males are encouraged to be aggressive. Culturally, it is sometimes seen as more appropriate for males to be more aggressive than females. This is true at all ages. Sexual assault is more likely to be penetrated by a male rather than a female. And most victims of full range of sexual assault, from harassment, incest, rape, murder, are female. This is not to say that males are not victimized by sexual harassment and violence. Sadly, they are. It is also the case that socio-cultural, typo y'all, socio-cultural expectations about masculinity include the false idea that men always want sex. That creates barriers for men who experience sexual violence from speaking up or reporting the incident. That's another typo. Violence based on the perceptions of someone being gay or transgender cannot be ignored as aspect of this topic as well. And violence between same-sex partners, including lesbian couples, is also problematic. Sex and research studies, both men and women report that they engage in sexual intercourse primarily because they were attracted to the person. We're going to keep going past this part. So abilities. Males tend to perform better on visuals and spatial skills than do females. Females on average demonstrate a stronger verbal skills than men. The size and strength difference between men and women allow men to excel at strenuous activities that require strength and endurance. On the other hand, Ginger from the famous dance duo Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers once said, "I can do everything that he does, only backwards and in high heels." Generally, it is assumed that men and women have similar abilities for most jobs. However, as of 2019, women's median annual earnings were only 79 cents for every dollar earned by men. For women of color, the gap is even worse, only 74 cents for African American women and 74 cents for American Indian women, and for supposed to be Latina and Hispanic women, typo. Parenting. Among the most ingrained gender-based roles in our culture are those of mother and father. Clear distinctions about the expected roles of each parent from the earliest prenatal visits. We're going to keep going. Some more of those. So we have gender identity, gender roles, and sexual stereotypes. Gender expectations extend to how males and females interact socially, romantically, and erotically. Gender schema are the mental representations that we all have about what males and females are physically good at and what are appropriate behavior and personality traits for each. These combine with the sexual scripts, which assume our gender is the basis of predetermined roles and actions. These cues and expectations are what form people about the dance of relationships and how we're supposed to be. Traditional sexual scripts encourage males to be the initiator of sex and romance and the females to regulate access to sex. This has been coined by the researchers as the sexual double standard. Hint, hint, the sexual double standard is going to be on the quiz, okay? In reference to the normative belief that men are regarded for having a high number of sexual partners, whereas women are penalized for similar behavior, right? This gender schema does not encourage females to seek or demonstrate sexual pleasure, while it is expected that men will be inexhaustible, adventurous pleasure seekers. Obviously, communication problems and inherent unspoken assumptions are very dangerous as couples experience each other in a context of non-reality. Expecting people to be a certain way just because of their sex encourages confusion and limitations. Interestingly, in a study published by Milhausen and Harold in 2001 found that men were likely to endorse a sexual double standard, whereas women are more likely to endorse a reverse double standard, in which men's sexual behavior was evaluated more harshly than that of a woman's. Soon after very young children know that they are a boy or girl, they get that there are certain things that are good to do. Oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. Excuse me. That are good to do and have and ways to be. because that they are a boy or girl. This development of gender role expectations is based on the saturation of media messages, modeling, and directing from family peers and other cultural influences. Without intention to treat babies or children differently based on their sex, it is consistently found that we do. This idea that males and females are different is typically learned and experienced throughout one's life. About age 5, boys have gotten the message generally that they act like boys by not acting like girls. Generally, males get less latitude in demonstrating androgynous or other sex gender characteristics than do females at all ages. Not until closer to puberty age do girls typically get strong pressure to not be like boys, to instead begin to be more ladylike or feminine. This more rigid approach to male gender expression is connected to societal homophobia that is generally felt more strongly toward gay men than towards lesbians. This misconception includes a false assertion that real men are masculine, and part of being masculine is wanting to have sex with women. You're going to stay after? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Please and thank you.
Okay, got you. All right. So yes, so when we're looking at that line graph and that androgyny, that's how much feminine and how much masculine you express. And within children, especially by a certain age, it's expected that you waver to one side or another and not have a neutral position. You're frowned upon if you're a male and you're more neutral. So that androgyny, where they're saying that demonstrating that androgynous gender characteristic is not looked upon, is frowned upon most oftentimes. And we do these things sometimes subconsciously. We do it with our own children and our other family members. They might not even be leaning towards being feminine. They're just, just a little more gender neutral. Again, it does not tell what someone's preferences are intimately. Transgender and gender diversity. So biological sex and gender are sexuality topics that often assume to be simple and black and white topics, an assumption that is simply not true. So how sex and gender are defined and experienced is widely varied, and there are many possibilities between the two traditional options, which is male masculine and female feminine. We know too that language is a powerful tool for positioning a viewpoint and furthering understanding about the possibilities that exist. It is to no surprise that the language we use to talk about gender and biological sex is constantly changing. So trans people are found throughout a variety of cultures around the world, and the treatment of trans people varies between and within cultures. In researching treatment of trans people around the world, in 2000, it concluded that in some cultures, trans people are given elite economic and social status, whereas in others, they are exposed to ridicule and contempt. Over the past decade, transgender and gender diverse individuals have been increasingly active and organized in the United States, helping all of us learn more about gender diversity and how we can collectively be more supportive to transgender rights. Political and social advocacy, coupled with emerging science and new awareness regarding the complexity of sex and gender, can make it confusing to know what words are best to use in some situations. Even knowing which pronouns to use can be tricky. So it may be that individuals will prefer different terms or labels, as is typically the case with aspects of one's personal experience and identity. They get to choose what that is. So gender identity disorders, sometimes called gender dysphoria, have to do in a broad sense with feeling unhappy about your biological sex or sex roles. So not all individuals who are transgender consider themselves to have that sort of disorder. Many trans identify individuals also like to use the term gender euphoria to describe how wonderful it can feel to have their gender affirmed and to live in ways that feel right to them or their gender. So definitions, y'all, here we go. You are going to want to bookmark this page, take note, something. Okay, so you got agender, which refers to someone who sees themselves as not having a gender. Some individuals may also use the term gender neutral to describe the feeling. Then you have cisgender. That refers to identifying as the same gender as one's birth assigned sex. So if your birth certificate identifies you as female and you still identify today as a woman, cisgender. Transgender refers to identify as a gender that is different from one's birth assigned sex. So if your birth certificate identifies you as male and you identify today as woman, being transgender is a gender orientation, not a sexual orientation. Yes, I know it can get complicated, but you get it. Not sexual orientation, meaning what you do with your partners, how you orient it sexually. No, this is what your gender when it comes to male, female, or other, because they said it ain't just two categories. Okay, so transgender individuals may identify as heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, queer, or some other sexual identity or orientation. Gender queer is a term that some people use to indicate that they identify outside male, female, gender binary, or otherwise don't subscribe to conventional gender terms. Transition is a word that's used to describe the process of moving from one gender to another. Gender affirming surgery refers to surgeries a person may have to make their bodies feel closer to how they feel inside based on their gender. Yep. So people who identify as third gender do not accept the common polarized gender identification as male, masculine, or female, feminine as fitting with their understanding of themselves. Some third gender people prefer sometimes to be called transgender, third gender, or gender queer. Many examples of third gender individuals, broadly defined, are found across cultures around the world. And last but not least, intersex. Intersex individuals, sometimes called those with disorders of sexual development, are those with anatomy mixes, male anatomy with female anatomy. Intersex individuals are neither 100% biologically male nor 100% biologically female. They are rather born with atypical sexual physiology, and intersex identity is the result of many separate conditions. So we're going to go over these few, and then we're going to go to that quiz, okay? We're going to be a little bit over. Chromosome variations. So there are over 70 irregularities or possible variations of chromosome combinations beyond the XX or XY alternatives. Hormonal variations and hormonal triggers during gestational development can affect the development of the tissue that is forming the fetus, external and internal genitalia. Okay, so you got chromosome variations, hormonal variations, and hypospadias. Yeah, something like that. Hypospadias. I don't know. I forgot, y'all. I got to look up the pronunciation. When the urethral opening is not in the usual place at the end of the penis or between the clitoris and the vaginal opening. So it's a condition. I'm going to look it up. Some of these conditions can result in an individual being born with external genitals that are ambiguous, and this means that it is not clear whether the organ that is present is a small penis or a large clitoris, okay? So when we talk about, let me just look that up really, really quick, pronunciation.
So it's over?
No, I
I
didn't know
left
how to
for 20
pronounce
seconds.
something. Wait. Hypospadias. Where the urethra opening is not in its usual place. Hypospadias. I didn't like not being able to pronounce that. My bad. So chromosome variations, a child's biological mother always gives an X chromosome for determining the sex of the fetus, and the father can give an X or Y chromosome. So if both give an X chromosome, XX, the child's chromosomal sex will be female, right? If the father gives a Y chromosome, which is a XY, the child will be male. Of course, it isn't always that simple, is it? So a condition called Turner syndrome affects 1 in every 2,500 live female births in America. In this case, the father does not give any sex-determining chromosome. They give an XO. The child will be born female and have distinguishing characteristics, including short stature, webbing between the toes and fingers, and infertility. So now there's a condition called the Klinefelter syndrome, and it is the result of an XXY chromosome pattern that affects 1 out of every 400 live male births. This means the child is born male and will likely be infertile. Another common variation is the XYY chromosome, and this child is born male and might experience difficulty coping with social expectations. So out of those hormone variations, all fetuses initially begin development as female, and at approximately 7 to 8 weeks of gestation, hormones are triggered by the mother that initiates the formation of the fetus that will become the external and internal genitals of the child. The timing and amount of the hormones determine whether tissues develop into the glands of the penis or the clitoris, the labia or the scrotum, and so on. So these variations in the appearance of the external genitals may not be apparent until puberty, and when secondary sex characteristics may not be in alignment with the genitals. So if a male fetus is insensitive to androgen, which is the male hormone, the fetus will be an XY. But when the internal and external genitals begin to develop, the insensitivity to the male hormone causes the fetus to develop as female. Typically reared as a female, this child will not menstruate or get pregnant, and sometimes surgery is performed to lengthen her vagina. For many people, there is complete congruency in the ways their biological sex is defined, and their gender fits with that. For some, incongruencies in the biological sex definers may be related to the ambiguity and uniqueness. Most sexual health professionals and clinicians no longer believe that performing sex reassignment surgery on infants or very young children for cosmetic purposes is appropriate. In most cases, surgery on children should be limited to those medically indicated, allowing the child to grow into their own sense of self and make these life-impacting decisions themselves after puberty and as they become an older adolescent or adult. As with most aspects of sexuality, feeling about this vary widely. All right, we have made it through the interactive activities for this unit. There are 2. In this unit, we discuss how people often start shaping or socializing someone's gender almost as soon as they are born, if not sooner, during pregnancy. Give 3 examples of how people do this. You want to click Save My Answer, and then you want to go to the next one. Gender inclusive language. Describe how sexual health professionals can use gender inclusive language so that everyone feels included and respected in our work. You want to save your answer, and you want to click Submit. We are now going to the quiz. Everybody ready?
Yes.
I'm ready.
All right. The case of David Reimer, or John and Joan case, provides a strong support for gender identity as socially constructed. Hold on, I'm gonna help with that one. I have false. It's a story in the reference. We'll just have to go back over it when you do your reading. Trans people primarily just live in North America due to the cultural norms of this land.
False.
That's false. 3, blank is determined by an anatomical aspect of a human being: biological sex, gender, gender identity, or sexual identity. Yes, think about it. Anatomy, anatomical aspect. Which one is it?
Biological sex.
Yep. Which of the following accurately describes the term androgyny? A social concept related to how biological sex shows up in people, possessing both female and male reproductive organs, an individual who is sexually attracted to both men and women, an individual whose gender may be perceived as ambiguous or falls in the middle of the gender continuum.
That one.
Yeah. Yep. 5, this term refers to people born in the body of one sex, but believe they are the other sex. Is that transgender, third gender, intersex, or gender dysphoria?
Transgender.
Transcendent.
Yes. This term refers to individuals whose anatomy mixes male anatomy with female anatomy. Is that transgender, third gender, intersex, or gender dysphoria?
Oh,
Third gender.
third gender.
How about intersex?
Intersex. Okay. That's also is that also a reference as being a hermaphrodite?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Yep, I'm not even gonna lie.
I think that's what they used to call it, but who knows? Who knows who made that up?
And it sounds about right, but it's like, man, when I start really going through these definitions, I'm like, you would get your head chopped off messing it up. I feel like there's very little room for calling somebody the wrong one. If you're gonna use the term, you better know what it is.
Too
So
many alphabets now. We done got too far with it.
yes, yes. So this term refers to people do not accept the common polarized gender identifications, male masculine, female feminine, as fitted with their understanding of themselves. Who is that? Is that transgender, third gender, intersex, or gender dysphoria?
Oh,
That was the
transgender.
last one. It was like the last type.
That was the third gender.
Third gender.
Third gender. Third gender. They don't want to go by the norm terms, whatever you done come up with. No, I'm not that either. They want something more neutral. Don't fit me in the box. There we go. 8, when a person's gender is perceived as ambiguous, this is called androgen deficiency or androgynous, neutral, anti-androgen. Yes, androgynous. 9, what is the explanation for sexual assault perpetration to be by a male rather than female? Is it because females are socially constructed to be passive, Culturally, males are encouraged to be more aggressive than females. There aren't any explanations for this, or sexual drive is higher in men.
Mm.
Culturally.
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 Yes. Yep. And they little, you don't even want boys and girls to play together the same because the boys are rougher, right? You know, but is that always true? No.
Mm.
But it's like, you know, they and if he not rough, they're gonna play it up like, yeah, he tough, you know, because he a boy. In research, studies blank report that they engage in sexual intercourse primarily because they were attracted to the person. Women, men, both women and men, or very few people.
Women.
Both. Both men and women engage because usually they're attracted to somebody. All right. 11. The mental representations we all have about what male and females are good at is termed gender stereotypes, gender schema, gender differences, or none of the above.
Schema.
Yep, gender schema. 12. What is meant by a reverse sexual double standard? Women's sexual behavior is evaluated more harshly than men's. Women's sexual attitudes are evaluated more harshly than men's. Or men's sexual behavior is evaluated more harshly than women's. Or men's sexual attitudes are evaluated more harshly than women's. Which are the first two?
Women's sexual behavior is evaluated
three.
more harshly than men's.
My bad.
The first one.
Why I got that? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why my notes say that ain't right, but I'm with you. I'm gonna do, which one did you say, the first or the second?
The first one.
Behavior.
Mm-hmm.
All right. For some
What number
reason,
is that? I just got into my quiz. Sorry, I had to skip
12.
ahead. Okay.
I missed that part about the reverse double standard. I can't even figure out what that is.
Yeah.
I remember you heard
Okay,
that
so the
from-
double standard is I can't do what he does.
When they say reverse double standard, that's why I'm thinking this one is the trick question. So
It gotta be. I'm because it makes me confused as to what the double standard is, and I know what that is.
it referred to the act of men having, because they're men, they can have multiple partners, or the more the better. And when women do it, it's frowned upon.
Yeah, okay, so that's the double standard. So what's the reverse?
So the reverse is why I probably have the third one as the answer.
The third one.
This one, okay. So I'm gonna put the third one, not because I'm not with y'all, but I do have my answer key, and it says that men's sexual behavior is evaluated more harshly than women's.
Right.
I think that's the reverse.
That would be the reverse.
I think that's
of the double standard. Yes.
I
So
said that.
I know that I got this wrong the first time I did it. That's why I got it marked down, but I didn't write an explanation by it.
Glad we were able to check that out.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a star on it though. That was one that I was like, how can I get this right? I'm confused. That's it. At what age do boys have the message that they should act like boys and not acting like girls? Is that 2, 3, 4, or 5?
Ooh.
And I have 3 boys.
Think about like kindergarten.
By the time that they're 5.
Yep. I think about like kindergarten. So by the age they're about 5, yep, you got to be acting like a boy, acting like a girl. And when they use that example of just like the play corners, dress up and all that kind of stuff, yep, by kindergarten, they got to know what boys do and what girls do. Based on the gender norms, right? 14, which of the above accurately describes the Turner syndrome? So remember we went over at the end those different 7. Hold on, I'm gonna go to 8 gender issues. And we start talking about the Turner syndrome. Y'all can see my screen.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, because this, again, if you were doing it alone, do the open book. Don't try to get all of them wrong and then be beating yourself up. Go back, because we just read that. Okay. It affects 1 in every 2,500 live female births in America. And in this case, the father doesn't give any sex determination. So that fetus is now a XO. The child will be born female, have distinguishing characteristics, including short stature, webbing toes, fingers, and infertility. Okay.
None
So
of the above. Oh, that's what it said for Turner syndrome?
That's the second one.
Wait, what was the question?
which of the above accurately describes the Turner syndrome? And it is children with the syndrome will be born female, having distinguishing characteristics, including short stature, webbing toes, fingers, and infertility. It's the second option.
That was the second, whatever.
Yeah,
The problem,
it
whatever
that
it
was
was.
somebody else with a K or something. I thought.
So that's
that one was
Turner's.
just again.
And
Turner
then
syndrome was first, and then there was another one.
the Klinefelter.
Yeah.
We didn't get to, you're right. It's right
I knew
under
I
it,
was
but
gonna
we
know that.
just read the Turners.
Okay.
I'm just showing y'all where it's at in there. So you'd be like, oh yeah. So now it's the number 15 is asking which of the above accurately describes the Klinefelter syndrome. So I'm gonna go to it and read it from the text. So then Klinefelter syndrome is the result of the XXY chromosome pattern that affects 1 out of every 400 live male births. And that's where the child is born male and will likely be infertile. And another, no, that's it. That was it for that one. That's the description.
What's the first one?
So the first option, the syndrome is XXY, and the child is born male and it will be infertile. So we're gonna hit submit. So 1 is false for those who are reviewing your answers. 2 is false. 3 is biological sex. 4, an individual whose gender may be perceived as ambiguous or falls in the middle of the gender continuum. 5, transgender. 6, intersex. 7, third gender. 8, androgynous. 9, culturally males are encouraged to be more aggressive than females. 10, both men and women. 11, gender schema. 12, so that one we had in question about the reverse sexual double standard, who was that on here who had it right? Yes, men's
I
sexual.
did, Valerie.
Yes, Valerie, thank you. Where were you when I was taking this the first time? No.
That's what I said. The sexual behavior is revert.
Yeah,
I thought somebody said something different.
yeah, you all got the reverse part. I just knew the sexual double standard. So the reverse is saying men's sexual behavior is evaluated more harshly than women's.
Yeah, that's horribly worded. They should have just made up a new word for what they calling it.
Yes.
Must make my brain short out thinking too hard.
Yep. So 13 is age 5. 14, children is the second option, children born female, having distinguishing characteristics.
Wait, what was 14?
The second option, the syndrome where they're born female, having distinguishing characteristics, including short stature, webbing toes, and fingers, and infertility. Yep. 15 is the first option, the XXY chromosome pattern that affects 1 out of every 400 live male births, and is where the male is born, where male child is born and it's going to be infertile. I didn't know how frequent that was. 1 out of every 400 live male births. That's a lot.
A lot of people. Yep.
Yeah, it is. But the only issue is that they're infertile. They still have male genitals, right?
Yep. Just 1 out of every 400 males are
Boy,
infertile?
I keep not paying attention. I need like 1 through 7. I don't know what I was doing. No, 3 through 7.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna stop the recording, let everybody off because we're 18 minutes over.
I'll be here.
Anybody that wants to stay on, I will be more than willing to assist. I want to thank you all again for a great evening, and thank you for all the wonderful support with reading and feedback, all that goodness. This is what helps us get through the study session and make sure that we're getting it. We're holding it in here. You're gonna remember this so much better than if you were to read it alone.
And that's true. But I need to, I'm scared. So I'm wondering if I stay on. I want to take the quiz because I was making plays when y'all were going over it, but I was still trying to
I got
chime in.
you. I got you.
I was answering the questions though. I just don't want to do it by myself and mess up.
Yes.
But I'll wait until you finish.
Okay. You know what? How easy is it for you? It's just you and Candace that wanted to stay on, right? Keisha and Candace?
I think so.
Are the both of you able to easily log off and get back on?
Oh, to Zoom? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to end the session because what that's going to do is allow the recording to start uploading.
Okay.
And then we'll be in a whole nother session and it's okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna just go out and give me about like a minute.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Okay, I need to do that.